What are you going to do to this poor, unsuspecting gentleman?
Well, we're taking, go ahead and relax your head down onto the floor. And what we've done is we've taken his own body weight, it's like an Aikido principle.
Okay.
And we're using his weight as a technique to apply pressure onto this narrowed point of contact. So what's your experience in that particular point of pressure?
It's rough.
Okay. Go ahead and bend your knees a little bit.
Okay.
Put this foot on the floor. You can turn that leg out a little bit. Now what I want you to do, bring your foot a little closer to me. There you go. And now you notice you can push off that foot and sort of roll yourself slightly one way and slightly back that way. So what we're doing is basically, as Emory and I talked about, we're trying to put power back in the hands of the person who owns the body, who owns the life force. And we stress that there are these four values. We want to open up blocked muscles, create coordination, strengthen what needs to be strengthened, pull the bones apart. And everyone's got some, incurably mutant deviant place where their musculature has gotten all ripped up because of their sitting patterns or their workout patterns or whatever. This particular roller, very, very useful in terms of breaking down myofascial restriction in and around the IT band, greater trochanter pelvic crest area. It's on ball bearings, and so you basically have this facility to give yourself your own deep pressure massage work. If you go ahead and lean slightly further back, you're going to get a slightly different area. And so my goal, if I'm working with you in terms of a coaching session, is that I'd go, all right, we're only going to do this once. I'm going to introduce you to a couple different areas of the hip socket. If you drop your hip more this way, it's a slightly different sensation, right? Slightly different tense area. Now I want you to either shift your hip forward or back and sort of basically just trusting your own intuition, pose the question, where do I feel like I'm getting the most benefit? There's no way to know that in advance. You've got to experiment. You've got to deal with the life that's actually yours. You try it this way, you try it that way. Maybe it's too intense in one area, so you slow down a little bit. This idea that at any one moment, there's an optimal speed, there's an optimal amount of pressure, enough pressure to dig into the musculature and convince it to let go, but not so much that it causes itself to protect and grip up. Yeah? Slow it down just a little bit. I'm going to sort of make an intuition that if you move a little less quickly back and forth, your muscles may be able to soften and open. Getting the musculature to open up is not something that you can force. You can't violate, you can't push life to open. You can't yell at somebody and say, open up! I mean, I've tried that, it doesn't work too well. That was called my relationships when I was younger. Let's try one other area, because we're just sort of doing a little bit of show and tell. I'm going to ask you to roll down a little bit more that direction. We're going to put it into the low back. So what I'm going to ask you to do is bend both knees, feet on the floor. You're going to bring your feet up like so. And I want you to roll past your butt. This would be the quadratus lumborum, the infamous low back area.
Ah, yes.
Go ahead and drop your knees slightly off to one side, towards me. There you go. Okay. Can you feel how that gets you off the spine into that muscle on the side of the back? Yeah. And then once again, you can push off your heels and you can roll slightly back and forth. You might want to drop your arms off to the side. Now the key is, as you keep shifting, I want you to pose yourself the question, what's the perfect speed for me to do this? Do I feel like I get better results slower or slightly faster? A long rock, a shorter rock? And that's going to depend on everything from how much sleep you've had, your caffeine intake, everything that's unique about your body. You might come in another day and want to go back and forth. Yeah. Go ahead and try dropping the knees off to the other side. This is meant not to be on the spinal cord itself, not on the vertebra, but onto that bulk musculature which runs up and down from the back of the pelvic crest all the way up into the floating rib area. You've got two different planes of motion here you can explore. You can rock forward and back. Or you could drop your knees slightly this way and slightly back this way. So like any piece of choreography, you've got three primary dimensions, front, back, side, side, rotation. And you never know which speed's going to work, which direction is going to work. This is where I will pose a sort of problem to solve with whoever I have the privilege of working with. Here, please experiment with this. Experiment and find which variation works best for you. Yeah?
I have a question. Why did you make it out of wood instead of the foam? Is it more durable? And I noticed that it's actually elevated, so you sort of can roll on it independently?
The reason for wood is that it is simply a much denser material. It applies a much deeper pressure than the foam. I try and create as many different options as possible. I have a variation of this which is only 3/4 of an inch wide and is made out of aluminum. It also rotates, and that's for someone who really deeply wants to dig into it. If we used foam, okay, that would be great, but it would not have the intensity of pressure.
Sure.
This is Foam rollers are traditionally 6 inches in diameter and slightly cushy. This is 3 inches in diameter and very, very non-resilient. So the pressure sinks far deeper into the myofascia. Yeah. So if you were to describe this experience in just like one sentence, you would say
it's a really deep feeling.
Yeah. Does it feel helpful?
It does.
Yeah.
It does feel helpful.
If it didn't feel helpful, we would do something else. Good. Cool. Come on up.
So what I'm saying is that from my experience, the best way to approach teaching someone anything is to look at your population and to tailor your instruction according to the people present. And regardless of the framework that you may have to follow, if you're teaching physics, mathematics, any form of exercise and movement training, I remember years ago, I used to come in the room with an agenda. In my mind, I'm like, we're going to do this.
I know that one.
We're going to do this today, we're going to do that, and after this, we're going to do that, and I had my plan, and I was like, yeah, and I get in there, and 3 minutes in,
Throw it out.
I'm like, looking across and realizing that what I had is totally irrelevant to the experience of them.
Absolutely.
And so I quickly learned how to tailor my lessons, that even though I may have had a generalized theme or topic, that I had to change my vocabulary and alter the lesson itself to get across the theme, that the theme and the information that I was trying to convey was far more important than my personal agenda on how
Absolutely.
it should be executed.
Absolutely.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is anytime people want to teach something to the masses, martial arts, for instance, a lot of the forms were done is to teach a lot of people. Shen Yi comes to my mind. When they wanted to teach Shen Yi, a lot of the forms were very simple because they were teaching it to the military. They didn't have a lot of time for nuance. Stick the guy here. Stick him again. Take 2 steps, stick them again. And so you see these things and they're like, and people get stuck into the form. And they don't tear it apart to get to what is this form informing? What is in here? And I look at it as an alphabet. Anything I've ever studied, the forms to me are just a story or an alphabet or a way of informing me.
Absolutely.
What's underneath that?
They're to point at something. Bruce Lee, the renowned martial artist, was very, very adamant that you could not achieve any kind of mastery through forms. Forms will take you, 84%, 87% of what's possible in magic. After that, you've got to break all the rules. You've got to be contextually relevant. And that's whether you're seeking mastery in any particular martial arts or dance, but also just simply in the biomechanics of your own body. Otherwise, what you're trying to do is really sell somebody something.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with selling people something. It's just that we need to figure out a better way to have more integrity and quality in the product. And it is very important that the information that we're communicating to people is authentic, especially when you're dealing with their health. This is what bothers me. It's not like you're selling me some kind of a widget, or a hat or something. You're selling me something that's going to impact me for the rest of my life. A lot of these people, when they do these things, they don't realize that the mistakes that they make, or if a teacher sets up an incorrect pathway in your body or an incorrect mode in your body, that you're probably not even going to see the results of that until maybe 5 years, 6 years, 10 years down the line, a negative impact.
Absolutely.
And so I take this very seriously because of what the positive things that we can do for people, but also it's a minefield. You don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want to set up things that are going to cause problems in people when your overall objective is to help.
This may or may not be terribly relevant, but it has a lot to do, I think, with how you look at this body. If my system is primarily targeting muscles and bones and joints, okay, I will see things in one way. I will standardize an approach for muscles.
Right.
If I look at this creature as a chunk of life, right? Life is a little bit harder to sculpt than a set of muscles.
Yes.
You got a bonsai tree, right? It's a lot of, okay, got to trim this, got to trim that, got to shape it. What is the shape of this particular tree? There's a level of personal training which is sculpting the life based on how's this life doing right now? What do we have to do? How do you understand how life over time will wear away this tendon or this cartilage or this joint?
Right.
It's the flow of life throughout a being. And I know that sounds a little overly poetic even to myself, but I think if you stay in the business long enough, just seeing bones and muscles and joints as levers and hinges and ropes can be a little boring.
Sure.
But if it becomes this question of how do I redirectionalize life through this torn bicep or past this shattered, radius ulna joint or whatever, then the purpose, the interest for the practitioner, as well as whoever you're trying to help, becomes, I think, a little more meaningful.
Well, what you're talking about now is very important because a lot of people don't adhere to exercise because they're not turned on by it. They're turned off by it. The whole myth that you have to even see a gymnasium to take care of yourself is just that. It's serving a certain interest of people who are selling gymnasiums. But in terms of actually having to take care of yourself as a whole, you don't ever have to see one. And also, this idea that you have to keep coming back, and I'm not trying to cut off our heads to, in terms of commerce, but there are plenty of people out there to teach. It's a big world.
Absolutely.
If you come to me to learn something specifically, it's like going to the university. If you never graduate, I really haven't done my job as an instructor. And so I think that this idea that you keep this person coming back and back and back, look, if they want to come back, that's different than my premise from the beginning is that I'm going to hook you and make you feel that you're leaning on me all the time. No, the idea is to get you independent of this process. You should graduate at a certain point, and if you want to come back and get more, I'm here.
There's a model from certain psychotherapy therapeutic traditions, specifically hypnosis, which says that there's two of you. There's the rational mind, and then there's the life down here, conscious, unconscious. Someone has to direct this creature while it's training.
Right.
I think the role of a personal trainer is a little bit which goes, okay, I have a little bit more skill in directing this creature than you do.
Sure.
I'll start. But as we start to train him, you and I together, you and I are going to work on training this creature here. Hopefully, every day, every time that we meet, a little bit more a hand the reins to you. And
right.
Here are some principles of timing. Here are some principles of strength. Here are some principles of coordination. I do believe that in an ultimate context between someone who's mentoring someone and how to take care of their body, it's meant to be like a parenting relationship. When you're 2 years old, if you're injured, if you've got a fractured bicep or a fractured femur or something, fine, by all means, I'll be the primary parent. You're only 4.
Right.
But at a certain point, you got to give the kid the car keys and hope that you've educated them not to get too drunk before they drive. Here, it's your life. See, this is your life. Now, I'll babysit once or twice a week, and you can pay me by the hour, and that's cool. But really, this grace idea is it's a lifetime job. When I walk down the streets, I keep my eyes on the horizon, my wide peripheral vision, and I'm paying attention to the breath rhythm and everything because I want to sustain grace throughout my own day. It's
right.
not just in my 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours of daily workout.
It's supposed to change you. It's supposed to change you. The work is supposed to change you. You're supposed to ultimately start to embody the work, and that's the happiest day for me as a teacher is
Absolutely.
when I see that embodiment in my students.
I've never had the honor of being a parent, but I can imagine that sense of pride when you sort of hand over responsibility of their life. Maybe 16, maybe 18, maybe in my case, very young. You can take it from here.
And also to see the progress. If I don't see progress as a practitioner, it kind of diminishes my interest in going forward. Monetary, let's take the monetary out of the equation. I'm doing this because I really, really love this stuff. It's fascinating for me, and I think it really is good for you. I believe it has a huge worth in all of our lives. And so if I don't see the actual process of you getting better, and I'm patient. I'm not putting deadlines
He's
and
much
time
more patient
frames.
than I am.
I don't put deadlines and time frames on it. And the kind of progress doesn't have to be some overwhelming da-da-da-da. Micro transformations for me are huge. Because sometimes we have to work micro, right? You have somebody who has a problem that needs a lot of care, and small movements are necessary. And even in that, once I see progress, then that makes me say I'm in the right track. And who wants to continue to come back to do the same thing over and over again if they don't seek some kind of progression? This is why I think a lot of people don't come back to these things, because there's nothing to come back for.
I am very adamant that if you come here, and I have the privilege of either having you in my class or in a private session, there should be absolutely sensorily verifiable change in your experience after one session. If not, well, then I'm obviously not the appropriate sponsor, mentor, caretaker of this life.
Right. There are lessons that you can, I remember I spent one day with Quentin Joseph, if he's out there listening to this. We were at a seminar, the first one-on-one training seminar idea put on for personal trainers in the US. But strangely enough, there were no personal trainers there. And so he and I, tired of, hearing what we heard, decided to go to the valley, to his training, his studio, and we did a session. And he showed me some things that I use to this day from that one encounter. And I've had that so many times because the information was that good. And I was like, wow, that's really good. I'm going to work on that.
This metaphor is a little, it doesn't quite nestle into it, but I remember hearing that in traditional Chinese medicine that the axiom was that if you got sick, you fired your doctor.
Interesting.
That there was a level of there being a mentoring and a responsible figure to guide the life in you to stay well. And our contract as a personal trainer suggests unless you're seeing progress, you should definitely seek somebody who will take care of you in that way. If you're not getting the results you want. And today, if you get sick, so to speak, find someone who can keep you from doing that.
And of course, there are things that you can't control. And I think the hardest thing for me right now is to try to get across to people that this is for taking care of yourself. That is what this whole entity that we're dealing with. That's when I talk about restoring function and maintaining function and enhancing function. Really, in a nutshell, what I'm talking about is you got to take care of yourself. There's just different ways of taking care of yourself. You wouldn't go a month without brushing your teeth. At least I don't think so. You wouldn't go a month without washing your body. At least I hope not. But people would think to go almost through an entire life process without doing anything for the bones, the tendons, for the muscle, for the circulation, for the agility, for the proprioception, for any of the things, for the actual skill of moving through space and how to handle things. Because we don't, as human beings, we don't learn. We're not like cats. We're not like other animals that even they are trained. So I'm going to back off from that because cats will be trained by play, dogs will be trained by play. Even they have a university in that. Maybe they learn faster than we do certain things. But this is the manual for the human body. This is the way that we're supposed to be, I believe, developmentally. That's why we have the capacity we do to do so much, is that we need to get those basic instructions so we can run with it. That's what I'm thinking anyway.
I noticed something in your language there. And you had posed earlier to some degree, what is your system, what is your approach here?
Right.
And this may sound a little semantic, but you started the last paragraph with the phrase care for yourself.
Sure.
And what you did then was you gave a very, very elegant list of muscles and joints and timings and I would say that training has as its key element, it's a service of care for the self. But we rarely, if ever, break down out of curiosity, what is this alleged self that we're caring for? And the logical levels that you listed, and I liked it because you were partly physiological, partly about emotion. We could add emotions and the mental level.
Absolutely.
And all that. But there is exercise physiology, which is about care of the muscles. And then there's exercise physiology, which is about care of the self. and it can be a personal practice of coming back to oneself. If I have an emphasis in this work here, and I love finesse of this neuromuscular engagement, and this joint articulation, and this angle of flexion or extension, and I'm that technical, I love the minutiae of proper technique.
I know you are.
But the interest is much more in this, what is a self? How can it be experienced? And it doesn't need to be woo-woo. It's not meant to be psychobabble. If you pay attention to all the topics and subjects that he just listed, you'll find yourself in those places. The self, whatever a self experience might be. It's in the utterly ordinary, average sensations of this muscle and that tendon and this sense of the life pumping and this temperature. And I think if you come into relationship through a ritual, like martial arts katas or a yoga practice or a dance vocabulary, there's a certain centeredness, a certain being present element of things that creates that grace that we keep coming back to as a theme, where you don't tear your own body apart. One of the major reasons to have grace is that you don't rip the tendons off the bones and you don't create excess tension.
Which I have seen, actually.
Well, I have done, actually. My earlier attempts to train myself were a little self-violent.
I see.
I was very adamant that that was the most effective way of getting the best out of myself.
Well, I think we had...
That was called my 20s, by the way.
Yeah, bingo.
But if you hang out and you keep up the practices for 10, 20, 30, 40 years,